I'm Terry Phillips. On March 9th, 2010, I talked with Tommy Smothers for my public radio program, Quality of Life. Tom and his brother Dick hosted a top-rated TV variety show, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, from 1967 to 1969. The topic of my interview was free speech in the workplace. We reflected on how much the world had changed, but in some ways how little it had changed since the Smothers Brothers were fired by CBS. Sadly, the same issues they were fighting for remained controversial 40 years later. And yes, even now. Here's my conversation with Tom Smothers. Tommy Smothers, welcome to Quality of Life.
Thank you, Terry. Nice to be here with you guys. Good idea. Quality of life.
It's a great pleasure to talk to you. For those who might not remember, in the late 1960s, you and your brother Dick had a terrific variety show on CBS, and you were talking about issues that were not generally discussed on national television. How did that go?
Well, the first, what happened was that we had a sitcom, the Smothers Brothers. It was called the Smothers Brothers Show. It was a half hour. It was Aaron Spelling produced it, and it was just a vacuous. We did 32 episodes, and it was a very unhappy experience. And I said, if I ever get another show again, I'm going to have some creative control over it. So within 4 months after that show was canceled, CBS picked us up with a variety show and said, go ahead. And I said, I need creative control. Sure, you can have it. And not thinking I was going to utilize it. But slowly I just thought that the show should have some relevance. At least the sketches shouldn't be back. It was without a point of view. And, of course, the anti-war movement was heating up in the Vietnam War and the voter registration, the Chicago riots and the Democratic Convention in 1968, assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. There was a lot of things going on, and Lyndon Johnson stepping down as not running again. So there was a lot of things that we started reflecting, and they said, you can't say that. Well, program practices, which is the censors, were not prepared for this sort of information. They were prepared to stop you from saying a dirty word or some kind of sexual innuendo. That's all they were talking about. So it became quite heated, and it got hotter and hotter each time, each season. And we brought in Pete Seeger and some other people, and the Buffalo Springfield, remember singing For What It's Worth, great song.
Sure.
Presented those things. So by the time the third year came, Mr. Nixon had been elected, and our option was picked up for a fourth year. But after he was elected, there's not going to listen to that stuff anymore. Criticism of or critical commentary satirical commentary on what they were doing. So we were fired, and there was a lot of pressure from the White House.
Now, 40 years later, we have wars going on, political discord, and a lot of inequality. Things have changed rather dramatically, right?
Oh, man, it's so depressing, isn't it? 40 years later, we were fired in 1968, and in 1969 it was. And here it is, 40 years later, and the same type of people running the same type of war, much more corporate greed than we ever had back then. At least it was 3 networks owned by 3 individuals. The media wasn't so consolidated as it is now. There's less space for real political satire and commentary. It's all on the fringes. Nothing in prime time there at all.
So isn't it odd that with all of the outlets, even though there is, as you say, this consolidation of ownership, that we don't have a national conversation about political issues in prime time?
I know, isn't that strange? It's not at all. I've had people come and say, guys, you can say anything you want now because you can say 4-letter words. You can have conversations on homosexuality and sexual mores and all this other stuff, but you don't hear the conversation out there. And it's quite frightening when you think about the Dixie Chicks. I'm too embarrassed. I'm ashamed to be from the same state as our president. And for 2 years, no one played them. Government didn't stop them, but all these companies stopped playing their albums and promoting it stopped their career pretty much.
I'm Terry Phillips talking with Tommy Smothers, half of the famous Smothers Brothers, who together had a terrific television show in the 1960s. They were fired. People mistakenly say the show was canceled. In fact, the show was not canceled. They had their contract renewed. They were going to be on for another season. They had lots of viewers and lots of interest. And then because of a growing disagreement with CBS television, the network decided to find a way to get the Smothers Brothers off the air. And in the interest of full disclosure, Tommy, I should tell you, I also worked for CBS at a time as a news reporter. I was not fired. I quit.
Well, things have changed. Things have changed so much for the worse, I think. Now it's much more oppressive. There's an illusion of freedom. The cable shows are just so mean-spirited for what they say about Obama, and that, I just cannot believe this. It's 24 hours a day. The Fox thing go on and on and on, and you wonder why they're allowed to say that. But then I'm a free speech guy, But when it starts going 24 hours, 24/7, you start to think that they're editorializing all the news, and it's frightening. Anyway.
So as somebody who's lived through this and has had some time to reflect on it, what would you suggest for those who want to have a voice? How do you go about doing that today?
Oh man, I don't know. There's information out there. It's like you're saying, there's no space for a national discussion, really. I think to be a good citizen now, you have to search out and find out where these people are talking. And it's always on the fringes and some nice, Freedom Television, and there's stuff out there, and magazines you can find, but it does take some effort to remain informed. I don't know, if Dickie and I had a television show again on broadcast television, we'd be off again quicker.
Is there a way to do what you did? Because you used a technique that Norman Lear later used very effectively. You used comedy. You entertained people to get our attention and to bring issues to a national dialogue. Is there a way to do that today?
Sure, there is. I was just saying that if you're going to be an artist, or if you're going to be a comedian, or you're a singer or an actor, you got to be a really, really good actor. You got to be a really good singer. You got to be a really funny comedian before you start putting in, political opinions and social commentary in a sense of talking about fairness in life and things like that. They don't hear you, and so they're like U2, and they use their celebrity. And I like the way that George Clooney and some of these guys, you see them step out here and do some nice things here, and boom, boom, then do some regular. But people are frightened for their jobs. They just. I listen to the Daily Show. He's getting so soft now. Jon Stewart.
Well, he also has interests to protect. He has a family.
I know, but he was kind of reckless in the beginning. I remember him, and it was wonderful. He attacked Keith Olbermann, who's my favorite. He's the only guy in cable. He and that Rachel Maddow. I love listening to them because I don't get to hear that kind of bright conversation on the progressive liberal side. In television, in the 60s there was no other viewpoint. It was all honk your horn, support the troops. If you don't like it, get out of here. And very, very heated. It didn't take much. It was what we did, and we're looking back at some of because we've got a DVD out there now on the Time Life series, and it's a 4-disc DVD that's got Pat Paulson for president and 5 hours of bonus material, a bunch of censored stuff that was taken out with Belafonte. But I look at all that stuff, and it's not radical by any means, but it was questioning our policies and being very aggressive about voter registration and civil rights and against the war in Vietnam. And The Pat Paulson for President special, done in 1968, is a classic satirical run for president. No one's ever done it since that time. That he was up in the Michigan legislature and the California state legislature, getting up there, giving these talks, and the people going screaming, and there was real crowds out there. It was so wonderfully deadpan, and it was a great run we had, and it's amazing that 40 years later we're still talking about it.
Tommy, I had dinner with a friend of mine last night. He considers himself conservative, and his question to you was, what gives celebrities, entertainers, the right to express a point of view on a national stage that other citizens don't have? How do you respond to questions like that?
Well, other citizens do have it. If you happen to have a bigger stage, you use it. Just because you have a big stage doesn't mean you're not allowed to express your opinions. I mean, they say, well, let actors shut up and let them act. Well, Ronald Reagan was an actor, too. In fact, Ronald Reagan told Dickie, my brother and I were at the White House for Easter Seals thing, and we were talking, and Ronald Reagan said that the president said that my brother said, it really helps to be a good actor in this job,
You and your brother are still performing, aren't you?
We've done 52 years now, and this might be our last year. We're not sure, but of all the years, we're known as a television act, but out of the 52 years we've been performing as a comedy team, a comedy duo, probably only about 5 years of that total were spent on television. 5 out of 52 years. And so it's amazing. It made a big impact at the time, and I think why it made a big impact, because they saw real censorship in action. A show being fired, some two brothers being fired right in the middle of this, the most controversial time in American history was those 60s. And to see two guys stand up and fight the big machine, it made an impression. So we get a lot of residual respect from back there, particularly from baby boomers and stuff. But when we first fired, boy, we couldn't get eye contact. It was kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of like you had a bad disease and they felt bad, but they didn't want to really deal with you. And so 10 years later, it was much different than 40 years later. It's a kind of a cause celeb. But
I've heard you asked this question before, and I'm curious to know if your answer is going to be different today. Is there anything you would do differently if you had it to do over again?
Very little. Very little. I thought we did everything I wish I had been more articulate. I would have done something different. I would have tried to kept my sense of humor in the last year. And during the last year, it got very tense with CBS and with the politics and the FCC, and I started taking myself very seriously, and I lost the joy. And I always tell the story that when we were fired in '69 and that 71, everything was dreadfully serious. Every subject came up, I would talk about it in the darkest sense of what was wrong. And I saw Jane Fonda on television one time with Johnny Carson. She was dreadfully serious about burning babies in Vietnam and plight of the farm workers, and I was kind of agreeing with her, but I just said, Dan, I don't like listening to this. What is it? And it struck me. I said, there's no joy, there's no sense of humor, and it just, boom, was an epiphany for me. I just turned it around. I said, I'm not gonna keep looking for the issue. The issue will find me, and when it's passionate, I will speak up. But otherwise, I'm going to be funny.
And the irony is that it was your sense of humor that got you where you were.
I know, but it was Dick Gregory for the longest time, a wonderful black comedian, and then he got very involved in conspiracy theories about the Kennedy assassination. He became a speaker, an advocate for a whole lot of causes, and he's just starting to go back to comedy again. But if that's your gift, that's the number one thing you have to remember. That if you're a singer, you're going to sing those songs. If you're going to sing songs, approach you to sing them, the best songs you can find to change people's mind. And a performer has a right to speak up, just like a non-performer. There's certainly much more risk, but then a regular person working at a factory or at a insurance company or whatever you have, speaks up, some they can dump them too. So the losing your job at the level we were at was devastating. It took us 10 years to get back up to speed.
Well, I'm delighted that you and your brother Dick are performing again.
Yeah, boy, the act is really it's really good. It's funny near the end of our career. We're really having as much fun and very confident on stage. No one's getting to see comedy teams anymore. We're the last one out there working, really, where there's a straight, the dumb guy and a straight guy, and that classic form. But might be near the end of our we might be taking a long sabbatical. We're taking a break. We're a little tired of each other, but on stage it works for us.
Well, I have always been and continue to be entertained and informed by you, and I thank you so much for being an inspiration to us all and for taking some time to talk to us about your life.
Well, thank you, Terry. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
That was my conversation with Tom Smothers, broadcast on March 9th, 2010. Tommy passed away December 26th, 2023. I'm Terry Phillips. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.